All right, so this was the final play of the Colts versus Broncos game. Fourth down and one in overtime. The Broncos decide to go for it. They're down three. Russell Wilson throws an incomplete pass across the middle. Stephon Gilmore breaks it up, but right here, KJ Hamler was wide open, and Russell, he didn't hit him. And the reason why is because Russell Wilson is not very good at passing across the middle of the field. He's usually good on the edges of the field. But I don't really want to talk about that yet. I'll get to that later. What I want to talk about now is how Russell Wilson avoided criticism all these years and how just now it seems he's been getting criticism. People are wondering, how is Russell Wilson suddenly so bad when all these years he's been good? He's been carrying the Seahawks. And the reason why is because the narrative that he's carrying the Seahawks, it's just wrong. Russell Wilson, he really hasn't had this many bad games in a row before. It's kind of new, somewhat unprecedented, but you have to take into account the fact that um, the Broncos probably just aren't really that great of a team. I mean, Russell Wilson had a lot of help all those years on the Seahawks. The narrative that he carried and his O line always sucked. Um, it's just wrong. He always had pretty good defenses. He when he was winning in the playoffs and winning a Super Bowl, making the Super Bowl, he had a legendary defense, a legendary run game, and he also had a great group of wide receivers. So when he goes to a team like the Broncos, I mean they have good players, they have good wide receivers, they have Judy, they have Sutton, but I mean, when you look at the Seahawks past receivers, Doug Baldwin, Jermaine Curtis, Golden Tate, Percy Harvin, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, all of these guys that were really good players. And you see that Russell Wilson suddenly in this new offense, he's just not as good as what we're used to. Part of it is him aging, part of it is he's just not really that great. He is somewhat of a system quarterback. Here he is compared to Geno Smith. This is from last week, though. So since then, Russell threw two interceptions in that Colts game. So he's at four touchdowns, three picks. Geno threw three touchdowns, zero picks. So he's at nine touchdowns, two interceptions. I don't really know how to calculate the yards here. Geno threw for about 300 around there, and Russell probably around 200. But yeah, when you look at the completion percentage too, Geno Smith 102 out of 132. That's 77%. Russell only at 61%. That's something to take into account here. That's Geno Smith's game now. Is he's a very accurate quarterback. Um, this was after the Lions game. He completed 77.3% of his passes in the season. That was the stat from the last one, but this is the highest completion percentage by any quarterback through a team's first four games. So yeah, Geno Smith making NFL history on the Seahawks, a team that Russell Wilson wanted to be traded from so that he could get the new deal with the Broncos. Obviously, 5-year extension, $250 million. Um, yeah, Geno Smith, highest passer rating here in week 5. That's after the Saints game, 139.5. And the Seattle Seahawks, led by Geno Smith, have the NFL's number one offense per Football Outsiders metric. So, I mean, the stats don't lie. The Seahawks have been really, really good with Geno Smith, better than they ever really were with Russell Wilson. And here's a big reason why. I want to look at this chart here. This is Russell Wilson's targets to players here. It's a heat map, as you can see. Very blue in the middle here, very below average. This is a 4-year sample, 2018, 19, 20, and 21. We see Russell Wilson, he can't throw across the middle, right? Part of it is his height, and part of it is just his game. So when we see him on the Broncos and we're wondering, well, what happened to Russell Wilson? I mean, he's really the same player that he always was. The only difference that we're seeing is that he's older. He's not on the same team that he's always been on. So he's likely having to learn new things, play in new areas. It's probably all different for him, but he's basically the same player. I mean, nothing has changed that drastically, right? It's him. He is the problem. And You can see it when you see that Hamler touchdown that he missed. Let's look at his contract, okay? And this is part of the way that Russell Wilson has avoided criticism throughout his career. I'm going to talk about that right here. Um, he signed this massive deal before he even played a single snap with the Broncos. So the first way that Russell Wilson avoided criticism when he was in Seattle was by being kind of an underdog, right? Russell Wilson never had high expectations for him as a third round pick. He played really well for that. I mean, a third round pick becoming one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL is a pretty big deal. But he was never really anointed as like the top guy, the lock for a top five quarterback. It was just kind of assumed. He's a good quarterback. He's really good. He sometimes he plays like the best. Sometimes he's not as good. But it averages out to being a top 10 quarterback usually. But what we've seen is these extremely high expectations have been put on him because of all the things that the Broncos have invested. Let's just look at the contract. He signed this before ever playing it down with them. It goes until 2028 when Russell Wilson is 40 years old. So they invested $250 million into him, a 5-year extension with 2 years still left on his current deal before he even played a snap. So immediately a complete flip from what he was seeing on the Seahawks. High expectations. Not only did they give him all of this money, this slice of the cap, but they also traded 2 first-round picks, Locke, Harris, Fant, just to acquire the guy, okay? Just to have the opportunity to give him this massive deal, which might actually be one of the worst contracts in NFL history if it keeps going at this pace, right? So, yeah, Russell Wilson, almost 34 years old. He's going to be turning 34 in like a month. This is what you're looking at as a Broncos fan, and it doesn't look good right now. Will it look good in 6 years? Yeah, that is scary, right? That is the first way he avoided criticism and why it's not working anymore. The expectations are extremely high when you get paid like one of the greatest players in NFL history. You get traded for with this massive deal, right? A lot of picks, players going just to acquire you. The expectations are going to be extremely high. That's a team saying, we're a quarterback away. This guy is going to take us to the next level, and it's not happening. In fact, they look exactly the same, if not worse. So, that's a big deal. That's a big reason that you get criticism. The second way he's avoided criticism is just because Russell Wilson, he's just a good guy, right? I mean, he's really cultivated this image, and for all that I know, it's completely true that he's a good guy. He's in the community. He's making a positive impact. He uses his platform for good things. We have so many players in the NFL and in sports in general where they do things that disappoint us, and Russell Wilson has never really disappointed any of his fans, at least off the field, right? He's never done anything that's abhorrent, that's made people, disappointed in him and sad to have his jersey, or, he's never been in a legal controversy, anything of that type. So you're not going to get much criticism when people feel, benefit of the doubt to this guy. He's a good guy. We like to have him on our team. And those things are still true about him. So that hasn't really changed. But that's a way that he avoided criticism until now. First point, he was mostly an underdog, not high expectations. The second point, he's just a good guy, right? We don't want to, trash people that we like. And it's easy to like a guy like Russell Wilson because of the things he does off the field. But now, with these high expectations, more criticism coming towards him, it's easier to dislike him, especially if you're a Broncos fan, because he's just not playing well. He's not playing up to your expectations. The third way that Russell Wilson has avoided all of this controversy is just the fact that he is a system quarterback, like I said. So um, he implements an offense that makes him look good, and it makes sense for the team to follow that type of offense. Russell says, "Well, I like to throw the ball deep. I like to take shots down the field. I like to hit the sideline. I can't pass over the middle very well." And teams will say, "Well, we're paying you all this money. You're a quarterback. You're a franchise guy. Why would we go against that, right? Why would we fit a square peg into the round hole and have him do something that he isn't comfortable doing?" So we see this type of offense, this type of system implemented. It's easy for Russell Wilson to put up good stats when they play the way that he wants to play. Um, It's not necessarily the best way to beat the defense, the best way to win games all the time, but it works pretty well because he is a good player. Um, the problem is he has very glaring holes. So yeah, a system quarterback. That's the third way that he does it. When we're seeing him on a new team now, it's kind of jarring. I think he's implementing his system. Maybe all of the players on the team and the coaches aren't necessarily used to it. I think it's kind of unfair to blame his coach Hackett for all of this because I mean, we look at Russell Wilson's heat maps here. This is just how he plays, right? You can't really get upset. This is what they were buying into. You had to expect this. This is his entire career. He's not just going to change overnight when you trade for him. So I think that's a big reason why he's getting criticism now is we're seeing him in a new place, in a new uniform. It's like a fresh start, and this is your first impression of him, right? Is that, wow, what's going on? This guy, he's not as good as I had in my mind, I had perceived, the idea of him. He's not as good as I thought. Like, what's going on? When he's on your team, when he's on the Broncos as opposed to the Seahawks, you see him in a different light, right? The same way that I'm a Seahawks fan, I saw Russell Wilson the way that I saw him as a fan. There were times that were very frustrating that you just don't catch when you're not a fan of the team. You're not watching every single play from every single game. Um, there are just things in your mind that are different from reality. So I don't think that he has really changed much as a player. I think we're just seeing him in a new scenario, and it's just not working out as many people had expected it to work out. So here's the last stat I'm going to end this with. Russell Wilson, like I said, throwing over the middle. Okay, this stat is covering that. So he's throwing over the middle a lot more this year. This was before the Colts game, so the stats have changed. But currently 16th in attempts at or inside the numbers. So 70 attempts inside the numbers of the field. That's 16th. There's 32 teams. Um, that's about average, right? Right in the middle. So the problem with this is that his completion percentage is 67%. Okay. That's 34th in the league. So there's 32 teams, like I said, 32 starting quarterbacks. He is worse than every single one of those. If you took the top 32 guys and made them your starters, he's a backup. That's how bad he is when he's throwing in the middle of the field percentage wise. So Jalen Hurts has similar attempts, 67, three less, but he's at 82%. And Jalen Hurts, I believe, is 6'1". Russell Wilson listed at 5'11", maybe he's 5'10", right? It's part of its height, maybe. Part of it's just how he plays. He's just not good at this type of passing, this type of offense. But the thing is, looking at these percentages, right, when we see Jalen Hurts is at 82%, the middle of the field is a big deal for your team, for your passing offense. Attack the middle of the field, right? When you don't have a middle of the field passing game, you can just run two high safeties and basically cover the outsides of the field. Just spread to the outside, two high safeties, basically leave the middle. And it's effective because you have these deep routes streaking down the sidelines and everything else underneath will be covered, and you can basically forget about the middle because he's so bad at that. It really limits you as an offense, and I think this is a big reason why he's looked so bad. Not just because his percentage is so low, but because he's actually throwing over the middle more. And like I said, when I was making the point about him being more of a system quarterback, I think the fact that he's throwing across the middle more is an example of the coaches, the new environment, trying to get him to do this thing that he hasn't ever really done before. And even though the rate of it's going up and they're focusing on it, he's still one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL, if not the. I don't know how many are ranked here, but definitely worse than the top 32, which is pretty bad. Yeah, that is a good example of what being a system quarterback is and how it affects your offense, why it makes you look really bad when you go somewhere else and they try to have you do something that most other players can do. So yeah, basically all I wanted to say with this video is, man, Russell Wilson might have the worst contract in NFL history. He's really going to be getting the criticism now because of all the things that have changed over the past year. And the situation that he's put himself in. Geno Smith, you love to see it. He was NFC Offensive Player of the Week in that Lions game. Just kind of unbelievable, right? I love to see it personally. Geno's making about like $2 million this season on a 1 year deal. Russell making a $250 million. Big value difference. Geno getting Player of the Week awards, breaking NFL records, even if they're just kind of ESPN stats. Still pretty impressive that Geno Smith at this point in his career is doing that. And I just think it really shows the system that Russell was in all these years with the Seahawks wasn't as bad as maybe everybody thought. He wasn't really carrying the team because, look, I mean, would you say Geno Smith's carrying the Seahawks? Maybe you would. Maybe you would. I would like to say it's just a good system, man. Most guys could have done it. I think if there was a different quarterback on the Seahawks all those years, the past decade or so, maybe there were more Super Bowls. Maybe the dynasty continued because with Russell, you really needed all those things. You needed the all-time defense. You needed the all-time running game, and we saw it in when he won an NFC Championship game, throwing 4 picks. His punter threw as many touchdowns as him. We saw it in the Super Bowl when he threw one of the worst interceptions of all time. He didn't really get criticism for those things, but now he is getting criticism because of the new place he's in. Geno Smith playing better than him. Not a good look. We'll see what happens. It's only week 5 that just passed, so we'll see what happens. I'll probably make more videos on this. If you enjoyed it, leave a like. See ya.